the director of the program and the past president of SAPI, Yusuf Patel, my colleague, Deputy Minister Nell, the MEC for Traditional Affairs, Cooperative Governance and Human Settlements in Gauteng, Paul Mashatile, the Executive Mayor of the City of Johannesburg, Tau, but more importantly, the President of SAPI, Ntato Minyuku, and all members present this morning. I wish to start by congratulating the South African Planning Institute on its 20th anniversary since it was established following the merger of the South African Institute of Town and Regional Planners and the Development Planning Association of South Africa. I would like also to pay special tribute to members of the Executive Committee for steering this ship over what must have been a very difficult 20 years. As conference delegates are aware, the planning sector has gone through a number of changes in the past 22 years, including policy and legislative changes, the introduction of new instruments, as well as institutions. Planning at the local sphere of government, as we all know, is governed by a legislative framework, the Municipal Systems Act 2000, that has been in place for the past 17 years. The Public Finance Management Act of 1999, which governs strategic and annual performance planning, budgeting, and financial management at the provincial and national spheres, has also been in place for the past 18 years. While the Municipal Finance Management Act was introduced in 2003. We recall the Development Facilitation Act of 1995, which was the first piece of legislation by this democratic government that was aimed at transforming settlement planning. We all know that it was struck down by the Constitutional Court in 2010, and this has given impetus to the finalization of the Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act of 2013, famously known as SPLUMA, which was signed into law after 12 years in gestation. There have also been numerous judgments by various courts of our land, including the Constitutional Court, as I've said, on matters related to planning in the recent while. In the main, the disputes have ended in the courts centered around the interpretation of the constitutional allocation of responsibility for planning. Sectoral legislation, of which there are many, and provincial planning legislation have been found to have transgressed by taking powers that belong exclusively to municipalities, and various courts of our land have made judgments that have helped us to clarify these matters. This also means that there is a lot of work ahead of us to bring all our planning legislation in line with our Constitution as affirmed by the judiciary. A more recent development that affects planning is that 7 years ago, His Excellency President Zuma appointed the first Minister of Planning, my previous cabinet colleague Trevor Manuel, in 2009, and in 2010 he appointed the National Planning Commission. In 2014, the President proclaimed the creation of a new department responsible for planning, monitoring, and evaluation, and in September 2015, he appointed the second National Planning Commission, which I have the honor to chair. The creation of all these institutions is intended to strengthen our country's planning capacity, which should result in more effective implementation of all our programs. As you can see from this brief historical account of developments in the planning field, planning is actually not new in South Africa. We have been planning since the dawn of our democracy. Over the past 22 years, we have produced hundreds and hundreds of planning documents at the national, provincial, and local spheres of our government. In fact, if producing all these plans and documents were a measure of progress, we would be much further ahead as a nation. But as we all know, a mere production of plans and documents does not constitute planning. And planning that is not followed by rigorous implementation does not transform South African society. We therefore need to build on these lessons of the past 22 years and introduce policy and legislative reforms that address the contradictions between the different legislations. During the period of this busy transforming apartheid legislation in the late 1990s and the mid-2000s, laws governing various sectors were passed, giving trumping powers on planning matters to ministers holding respective portfolios. And with the benefit of the various court judgments, we must correct the defects in our law. Similarly, the allocation of functions to different ministries is inconsistent with our current institutional makeup. And this is due to a large measure to the fact that the ministry and the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation are among the youngest institutions in our country. In their absence, responsibilities belonging to them were therefore assigned to other institutions. Furthermore, the frameworks that govern planning in our country, while they have served us well, they have been shown to have some deficiencies which must be addressed. We have now the National Development Plan, our Vision 2030. As the President has said, this is our roadmap for the next 20 years. This NDP should therefore guide all actions that we take and decisions that we make as government, as well as all sectors of South African society. It is therefore very heartening to hear almost everyone referencing the NDP in speeches. However, as planners, you should know, you have a duty to ensure that departments and all other institutions do not simply pay lip service to the NDP. The plans, the budgets of various institutions must advance the goals of the NDP. This, by implication, means that planners yourselves have to have a very deep understanding of the NDP. There's also been some policy ambiguity with regards to rural and urban development. A number of programs have been implemented in the past 22 years in a policy vacuum, leading to some unintended consequences. Let me now turn to what we are going to address, how we're going to address these issues. I've already indicated that we need to amend the laws, and this process is ongoing. Government is beginning to implement the recently promulgated Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act, the SPLOMA, as I've said. The fact that we have this law in place is a major achievement which we must celebrate and also to support. It is by no means perfect, and like all others, it will be amended as we go along, drawing on lessons from practice. The matter of aligning, as the program director alluded in his opening remarks, the assignment of functions with regards to planning with our institutional makeup is also receiving our attention. In discussions between myself and the Ministers of Rural Development and Land Reform and Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, we have agreed that the planning functions must be relocated. This agreement includes that the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation will now take over the responsibility of driving and producing the National Spatial Development Framework, a plan which will indicate what aspects of our National Development Plan will happen where and when across the whole of our country. Officials from our respective departments are working out the technical details to give effect to this decision. I've also requested that we finalize the National Spatial Development Framework very soon, which must ensure that South Africans have a clear understanding of how our national programs will transform our national landscape. Admittedly, this agreement that we have reached with the ministers deals with one part of the fragmentation of our planning system. And once we've completed that work, attention will then turn to other areas of planning. In 2014, the responsibility for regulating strategic and annual performance plans were shifted from National Treasury to the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, and also from provincial treasuries to offices of premiers. And related to this, we have also established a unit at DPME to assess the socio-economic impact of all our policies as well as our laws, which is called SIAS. These are very important developments in the quest to ensure that plans are aligned to the goals of the NDP. We have also developed a discussion document on proposed reforms to the planning system. This document draws on lessons from various countries in different parts of the world and makes a number of proposals that affect all spheres, including the following. One, that government should prioritize a strong commitment to spatial transformation and identify specific policy instruments and incentives that can serve as the entry points to initiate process of transformation. Two, at the national sphere, the responsibility for formulation of National Spatial Development Framework as contemplated in the SPLUMA should be assigned to an entity responsible for the planning function to ensure that spatial planning plays its coordinating role most effectively. Three, national departments responsible for concurrent functions should take responsibility for disaggregating data to the provincial and municipal levels. Four, amend the frameworks to introduce greater flexibility and put greater weight on non-measurable aspects of strategic plans and annual performance plans. Five, reduce the perverse incentives of target setting by tracking and analyzing progress towards targets rather than just whether or not targets are met. Six, strengthen interaction between national and provincial planning entities through re-establishing a forum for regular interactions. Seven, municipal IDPs should promote greater selectivity on what is focused on based on the responsibilities of local government and the priorities of the NDP. And during the course of this conference, officials from DPME will make a detailed presentation of the planning discussion document in one of the parallel sessions, probably tomorrow. On the matter of addressing policy ambiguity on urbanization, earlier this year, Cabinet approved the Integrated Urban Development Framework, IUDF. This Urban Development Framework is a policy initiative of our government coordinated by the Department of Cooperative Governance. It seeks to foster a shared understanding across government and society about how best to manage urbanization, as Paul has indicated, and achieve the goals of economic development, job creation, improved living conditions for all South Africans. This framework deals with challenges of transformation that range from apartheid spatial planning to the continuing increase in urbanization in South Africa. As we know, Stats SA said 60% of South Africans live in urban areas, and this process is proceeding unabated. It is about maximizing the potential of urban areas by integrating and aligning investments in a way that improves the urban form. My colleague, Deputy Minister Nel, as we've seen in the program, will also give a detailed presentation on the IUDF later today. Role of innovation in planning. In 2012, the National Planning Commission and the Gauteng Provincial Government agreed to initiate a partnership for urban innovation, PUI, the purpose of which was to find innovative ways to address challenges and also take advantage of opportunities presented by urbanization for the benefit of the population and cities. One of the projects of this dynamic partnership is to produce publication on case studies covering various innovations that address urban challenges. We made a decision to contract young researchers, given their inquisitive and creative minds, to write these case studies, and the publication will be released later this year. And some of the topics covered in the publication include the importance of knowledge-driven solutions to social and economic transformation, with particular reference to the taxi industry in South Africa. A case study of the San Francisco Commuter Benefit Ordinance as a means to incentivize the use of public transport and its potential for South Africa. Land development and sustainable human settlements, the certificates of additional development potential, a concept that was used in Brazil to auction development rights and stimulate social investments. And lastly, but not least, an innovative approach to public-private partnerships to deliver housing in the gap market were also explored. Other urban innovations, traffic management. Cities are increasingly making use of technology to reduce traffic congestion. In New York, for an example, the city has recently piloted the program that installed sensors along 23 crucial intersections that detect the number of cars waiting for a traffic light to change. This information is then fed through a system at the city's traffic center, which then analyzes the data in real time and provides recommendations to traffic engineers to adjust traffic light patterns to help things move forward. Sidewalk tiles that generate electricity. In London, companies are building sidewalk tiles that convert kinetic energy to electricity that can be stored and used to power streetlights, signage, or even office buildings. Such innovations will be very instrumental in dramatically reducing our carbon footprint while reducing the cost of electricity at the same time. In conclusion, delegates, planning requires clear and enabling legislation, policy, and guiding framework. It also requires institutions with people who have the necessary skills, like yourselves, with commitment to the transformation of South African society. The clarity of the roles is absolutely necessary, as is the data to support planning. Finally, the world is changing rapidly. Urbanization is taking place at a very fast pace, and we cannot solve today's challenges with yesterday's solutions. That's why I agree, disruption and reinvention. We must innovate. As I've indicated during this talk, all these issues are receiving our attention, and I would like to extend an invitation to members of the planning profession to work with us as we embark on these dynamic reforms. I thank you.